The 1950s didn't just change the world, they ruined it, and they did it with a smile. We call it the era of optimism, but in the archive we know it as the Great Anchoring, the moment humanity was chained to a throwaway culture. Chapter 1. The Time Panic Files. To understand our current exhaustion, we must go back to the Great Depression's end. In the 1930s, they realized technology was moving too fast. By 1933, the gospel of work was under attack. Technologists predicted a future where labor was nearly obsolete. They spoke of a world where we would only work 3 hours a day. But to the elites, this was not a dream. It was a crisis. The technocracy movement was the first crack in the industrial facade. It promised liberation from the clock, but the institutions of power knew that a free mind was a dangerous mind. The social order depended on your exhaustion. They feared what a man would do with all that time. They feared the potential of a human mind that wasn't anchored by the assembly line. And so, they decided to fill the void before we could ever claim it. They called it the boredom crisis. Sociologists and industrialists met in secret to solve the problem of leisure. They didn't want to give us free time, they wanted to give us shadow labor. Tasks that looked like fun but felt like duty. Home economics was the first weapon. It transformed the domestic space into a factory. Women were no longer just living, they were managing resources. Their movements were timed, their efficiency was measured. The kitchen became a laboratory of control. Taylorism, the science of efficiency, was moved from the factory floor into the living room. The efficiency expert became the new high priest of the home. Every second of your life was to be categorized, analyzed, and optimized for consumption. Next, they came for our play. They decided to transform the very nature of the hobby. It was no longer an escape. It was a way to keep the gears of productivity turning even after the sun went down. The shadow job was born. Behaviorist psychologists began to view the human mind as a programmable circuit. They designed leisure activities to be mazes of minor rewards. You weren't painting by numbers, you were being trained to follow orders with mechanical focus. The psychological toll was calculated. We were being trained to never truly rest, ensuring our focus never wavered from the act of perpetual production. The mind was anchored long before the body was chained to the desk. They wanted to make sure you were always getting something done, even in your sleep. This was the first anchor, the psychological chain that would lead us directly into the era of plastic and the paper dress experiment. This mechanical mindset became our new nature. We became the very thing we feared, a living part of the industrial machine, forever turning, never resting. The human became the ultimate commodity. The archive records this as the Great Anchoring, the moment our time ceased to be our own. We have lost the ability to simply be. We have entered the era where even our dreams are managed by the institutions that own us. The files are clear. The trap was set long before the first plastic bottle was forged. Welcome to the Museum of Idle Hands, an exhibit of a world that no longer exists, because they have ensured your hands are never truly idle again. Chapter 2. The plastic graveyard follows, where the anchor was forged in oil and synthetic bone. The silent archive will continue. Chapter 2. The plastic graveyard, where the anchor was forged in oil and synthetic bone. We are entering the era of the immortal material. Then came the plastic, vulcanite, celluloid, bakelite. Each one promised a miracle. Each one brought a hidden poison. We replaced the breath of wool and flax with the cold, sterile touch of synthetics. We traded the living for the immortal. We traded the cycle of rot and rebirth for the permanence of the factory floor. The very fabric of our reality was being rewoven in oil. Bakelite was the first, the material of 1,000 uses. It was marketed as the ultimate consumer dream, a substance that could take any shape, mimic any color, and last forever. It was the first step into a world that would never rot. But the miracle was a mask. To make Bakelite, we had to rethink our relationship with the earth. We moved from the harvest to the extraction. We began to forge a world that was independent of nature's rhythms. The archive records this as the synthetic turn. The moment we began to replace our own organic history with a synthetic bone, we were building a civilization that nature would never be able to reclaim. By the 1950s, the dream was everywhere. The world of tomorrow was a world of plastic. It was bright, it was colorful, and it was deceptively clean. A sanitized utopia where nothing ever faded and nothing ever died. But today, those miracles have fragmented. They didn't disappear, they just became smaller. Too small for the eye to see, but large enough to rewrite our biology. The microscopic invasion had begun. Tiny, jagged stars swirling in our water, our soil, and eventually, our blood. The archive records it not as progress, but as a permanent contamination of the human vessel. We are becoming the graveyard we created. Every breath we take is a breath of ancient sunlight and modern synthetic dust. The anchor is no longer just psychological, it is biological. The plastic era gave us more than new tools, it gave us a new philosophy. The disposable mindset. If something is easy to make, it is easy to throw away. And if things are easy to throw away, why should anything last? This mindset was the ultimate poison. It infected our relationships, our work, and our respect for the tangible world. We became a culture of the ephemeral, anchored to a profit margin that required constant replacement. We built a mountain of convenience that now looms over our entire history, a monument to the great anchoring that will outlast the very institutions that built it. We are living in a tomb of our own making. The files on Chapter 2 are a warning for the present. The transition is complete. The anchor is set. We have successfully replaced the rot of life with the immortality of waste. Chapter 3. The death of craft follows, where the machine became the Trojan horse of our own obsolescence. The silent archive continues. Chapter 3. The death of craft, where the machine became the Trojan horse of our own obsolescence. The archive records the moment the hand lost its power. Before the machine, there was the needle. Mending was a sacred duty. A garment was not a commodity, it was a companion, built to last lifetimes through the art of the hand-strong seam. We lived in a culture of preservation. We understood the weight of the material world. To mend was to value time. To sew by hand was to anchor oneself to the tangible. The hand stitch was an interlocking chain of intention. It was durable because it was human. It was designed to outlive its creator. But the machine required a different kind of logic. They told us the washing machine was a gift, a liberation from the drudgery of the scrub board. But the machine was a Trojan horse. It brought with it the requirement of fragility. To make the machine work, we had to destroy the craft. We traded the strength of the hand stitch for the fragility of the machine lock. The machine didn't just wash, it dictated the terms of creation. The lock stitch was designed for speed, not endurance. It was the first step in built-in obsolescence. A single break and the entire structure collapses. The machine made us faster to kill. The home was industrialized. Domestic labor was rebranded as professional management. We stopped creating and started operating. We lost the feel of the fabric for the cold vibration of the motor. Wattage became liquid gold. Consumption became a moral act. To keep the machines turning, the archive tells us, we had to keep buying. Convenience became the ultimate predator of quality. We didn't make things better. We just made them easier to replace. Quality was murdered by the very convenience we craved. A world where nothing was meant to last beyond the next cycle. The greatest loss was not the fabric, but the knowledge. The next generation did not learn to mend, they only learned to discard. The hands that once built were now only trained to push buttons. The archive records this as the final severing, the moment we lost the power to sustain our own physical world. We became a culture anchored to the ephemeral, drifting in a sea of broken threads. The optimism of the 1950s was the mask, a cheerful facade for the systematic destruction of human craft. We were being prepared for the ultimate experiment in disposability. The death of craft was the prerequisite for the great anchoring. We had to be rendered helpless before we could be rendered dependent. The archive is clear. The needle was our last line of defense. Chapter 4. The paper dress experiment follows, where the disposable mindset reached its absolute absurd peak. The silent archive continues. Chapter 4. The paper dress experiment, where the disposable mindset reached its absolute absurd peak. The archive records the final triumph of the ephemeral over the tangible. We are entering the era of ash. In 1966, the Scott Paper Company released the Paper Caper, a shift dress meant to be worn twice and discarded. They didn't sell a fashion item, they sold a surrender. Over 500,000 people accepted the terms, trading silk for pulp. It was the ultimate corporate pivot. They didn't want to sell you a product, they wanted to sell you a subscription to your own existence. Every dress was a service unit, designed to be used, billed, and then vanished from sight. They promised us liberation, freedom from the laundry room, freedom from the weight of ownership. Style was rebranded as a fleeting headline, cheap, loud, and designed to be forgotten by the following morning. The material was Duraweave, a fire-retardant paper reinforced with a rayon scrim. It was an engineering marvel of fragility, a fabric that feared the rain and invited the flame, the physical manifestation of the great anchoring. But the optimism was a mask. The paper dress was a psychological drill. It was training the human mind to accept that nothing is meant to last. Not our clothes, not our tools, and eventually, not our very institutions. The experiment expanded beyond the closet. We saw paper furniture, paper plates, paper cutlery, a world built on the throwaway culture. We were building a civilization of ash, anchored to a profit margin that required destruction. Within 6 months, 500,000 paper dresses were manufactured. 500,000 pieces of reinforced pulp, infused with chemicals, designed to sit in the earth for centuries. The landfill became the archive's true reading room. The hard turn of the 1970s revealed the truth. As the economy shifted, the convenience was revealed as a predatory tactic. The utopia was never meant for the consumer. It was meant for the corporations that owned our time. We are still living in the shadow of that mid-century curse. The optimism of the space age was the anesthesia for the great anchoring. We traded our respect for the material world for the cold convenience of the industrial tomb. We didn't just trade silk for paper. We traded our ability to sustain ourselves. We became a culture of drifters, anchored to a future that was designed to discard us. The human being became the ultimate disposable commodity. Look closely at the ash. It is all that remains of our autonomy. The great anchoring is complete. We have successfully replaced the tangible with the ephemeral. We have entered the era where even our history can be discarded. The archive is now closed. The great anchoring is not a historical event. It is our current condition. We are the curators of our own obsolescence. Remember what you have lost. Remember why you were told to smile. This is the silent archive. A record of the world we traded for a profit margin. The gears are still turning. The anchor is still set. The transmission will now terminate. End of entry. Prepare for the next transmission. The archive is eternal. No thought is free. No second is your own. Sleep now, while the machines still turn. Chapter 5. The Consumer Debt Anchor, where the great anchoring found its financial weight. The archive records the moment we traded our future for a comfortable present. Before the 1950s, we were a culture of the hearth and the savings jar. We understood that to own something, one first had to earn it. But the institutions of the post-war era had a different plan. They had to break the cycle of patience. They had to destroy the idea of the nest egg. Saving was rebranded as stagnation. To keep the machines of industry turning, the consumer had to be rendered permanently hungry. The installment plan was the financial Trojan horse. It promised liberation. Buy now, pay later. It was marketed as a gift to the middle class, a way to claim the world of tomorrow today. But the later never arrived. By accepting the plan, we accepted a psychological chain. We weren't just buying a dress or a car. We were selling the next 30 years of our labor before we had even lived them. Suburbia became the enclosure. Every identical house was anchored by a mortgage that required a lifetime of compliance. The lawn was green, but the soil was made of ledgers. The dream was a calculated debt. The archive records this as the management of the future. By controlling our debt, the institutions controlled our movement. A man with a monthly payment cannot afford to walk away. He cannot afford to be idle. The ledger became the true map of the human soul. Every entry was a link in the anchor. We became curators of our own liability, optimizing our lives to serve a balance sheet that would never be settled. Consumption became a moral obligation. To stop spending was to let the machines die. And so, we kept buying. We traded our autonomy for the liquid gold of wattage and the fleeting comfort of the disposable. The debt wasn't just financial, it was psychological. It ensured that our focus remained locked on the act of earning, preventing any thought of genuine liberation. The mind was anchored to the interest rate. We became the living collateral of the industrial state, forever turning the gears of a machine that was designed to consume us. The great anchoring was complete. Body, mind, and future. The archive is a mirror. Look at the shadow. It is not yours. It belongs to the institutions that own your time. We are living in a tomb of interest, striving for a utopia we have already sold. Chapter 5 is the evidence of our dependence. The anchor is forged in the ledger. Remember what you have traded. Remember the weight of the smile. The archive is clear. The jar is empty. Chapter 6. The curated future follows. The final entry in the records of the great anchoring, the silent archive, will conclude. Coming next. Chapter 6. The curated future. The final entry in the records of the great anchoring. The archive records the moment the machine moved from our homes into our minds. The great anchoring did not end with the 1970s. It evolved. The institutions realized that to truly own our time, they had to own our attention. The domestic machine was replaced by the algorithm. The paper ledger became the digital cloud, a vast, invisible archive of our preferences, our fears, and our movements. We are no longer operating the machine, we are being operated by it. The algorithm is the new efficiency expert. It measures every second of our idle time, categorized not by what we produce, but by what we consume. The boredom crisis has been solved by the infinite scroll. Identity has become the ultimate disposable commodity. We trade our authentic selves for a curated profile, a digital paper dress meant to be worn, liked, and discarded by the next algorithm cycle. We are told we have control. We are told we can opt out. But the archive reveals the truth. The button is jammed. Once the anchor is set in the data, it is permanent. Autonomy is the new ephemeral. The institutions no longer need to chain us to the factory floor. They have chained us to the screen. We are the curators of our own digital enclosure, optimizing our attention to serve a profit margin we will never see. This is the end of the entry. The great anchoring is complete. Remember what it was like to be unmeasured. Remember what it was like to simply be. Before the smile became a mask, the silent archive will remain. A record of the world we traded for the ghost of a utopia. The transmission is now terminating. Sleep now, for the algorithms are still turning. Transmission terminated. The archive is eternal. No thought is free. No second is your own. The archive is not a cage, but a mirror. We have shown you the links of the great anchoring, the psychological weight, the financial chain, and the digital enclosure. But every link has a flaw. The institutions own your time, but they cannot own your silence. To reclaim the future, the archive tells us we must first reclaim the past. We must rediscover the weight of the material world, reconnect with the hand, rediscover the art of the mend. Each stitch is a refusal to be disposable. Each repaired thread is a break in the anchor. The hand is our first and last line of defense. Reclaim the unmeasured second, the moment that belongs to no one but yourself. Before they can categorize your boredom, find the silence. Be uncurated, be unmeasured, be idle. Look up from the screen and see the world that does not turn on a profit margin. The great anchoring ends where your autonomy begins. We are the architects of our own liberation. This is the final transmission from the silent archive. The gears will always turn, but your mind is no longer part of the machine. Remember what you have found. Remember who you are. Transmission ends.